Okay, here we go. As I always start things, let's say hello there and welcome to Season 1, Episode 40 of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. As always, I am David the Nerd Emperor, and I shall be your host for this particular hour-long diatribe. I hope you're having a great day. Like I said, it's Monday, May 18th, and we'll get into the significance of that date in my life here shortly. It's nothing major, but it's something that's somewhat significant. It does kind of matter. So, anyway, as always, you can follow us not just on Spotify, where we began, but on Amazon, Audible, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/WSPDragons. Hopefully, some of you are watching it on there right now, and will consider signing up. There's a free membership, gets you a few things, but then the premium stuff starts at just $3 a month. Come on, guys, you're paying $27 a month plus tax to watch crap on Netflix. It's not worth watching. Come on, this is somebody who's... I've been writing my whole life, talking about current events my whole adult life, and I've been there and done that, folks. Okay, I'm serious. I have worked in a lot of fields. I have been to a lot of places. I have done a lot of things, and I have seen some stuff. Not to the degree that maybe Dennis Quaid in the movie Strays has seen stuff, but yeah, anybody who's seen that scene, S-E-E-N-S-C-E-N-E. Anyone who's seen that scene in Strays knows what I'm talking about, because Dennis Quaid has seen some... But anyway, we'll get the announcements out of the way real quick. Like I've said, it's patreon.com/WSPDragons. The first 14 chapters of my first completed novel are already out. Chapter 14 went up yesterday morning. A new chapter drops every Sunday morning so that you can read it when you get up or get off from church or whatever you're doing on Sunday. The first chapter is available for free as a teaser. You can become a sponsor to read the rest as it comes out, as all my future works come out. Guys, I've got 29 novels in the works. I've already laid out the series and the stuff. There are several standalone novels, and then there are a couple of sextets. Yeah, I've got some writing I'm doing. I'm getting some stuff accomplished here, and like I say, there are not enough hours in the day. I was up until 4 a.m. last night brainstorming. The alarm hit me like a brick to the side of the head at 8 a.m. today, and here we are. But $3 a month, 10 cents a day, you can sponsor somebody who's been writing since he was... Really, I've been writing since elementary school, but when it comes to writing for pay, I started when I was 18 with a newspaper job, and then went out of that field, went into other fields, came back into journalism, then did it for another 16 years. So 17 total years in the business, 4 million, give or take, words in print. And I got to level with you, I think that's kind of a conservative estimate, because 4 million words a day equals, or 4 million words total, I'm sorry. 4 million words a day divided by 17 years is, what, 225,000-ish words a year over 260 work days, and I know damn well that I averaged more than 1,000 words in print every day. I had days where I was writing 3 and 4 things at a time, so yeah, it's probably more like 5 or 6, but we're saying 4 as a conservative estimate. So, hey, I've got many more. Love's Crucible is something on the order of 90,000 more words, and that's just 1 out of 29, like I said, novels that are coming out. The next one coming out after that's going to be called The Mustard Seed, and we're working on Diary of an Elf. The first chapter of that has already come out on the Patreon page. You can check it all out. But enough of that. It's time. Let's get on with the show, and as always, we try to start with war, but we don't have any major news going on from Iran and the Third Gulf War right now. They're apparently still in a little bit of a talking phase, and there is a little bit of action. I think a Chinese ship got stopped by the Iranians in the Strait of Hormuz, so I guess the goodwill only goes so far. But we're not going to delve deeply into that because we've got wars in other places that we want to talk about, places that matter more, places like the World of Trinith, my fantasy campaign, because at least there things can make a little bit of sense. But speaking of the fantasy campaign, we're going to revisit something that we didn't discuss last Friday in the podcast that I alluded to and started to discuss, but as always, I got sidetracked because I tend to do that. I go off on tangents, so just expect it, okay? Just go with the flow, all right? Ride the insanity. Enjoy the ride. It's fun. You know, we have cookies, so whatever. But here's where we're going to... I'm just wrapping up the headphones. Here's where we're going to talk about baseball in a fantasy role-playing game setting. Now, in the world of Trinith, there is organized baseball. There are a number of organized leagues. Baseball, soccer, jousting, polo. There are a number of sports that we would recognize in our world that are sports in Trinith as well, because people need things to do in their spare time. They're starting to establish a decent standard of living, and it's not just all medieval subsistence farming that's going on. There are some rather cosmopolitan areas, and people actually have spare time now. So for those that do, there are things such as baseball, and we're going to get into that right now. So let's do it. Okay, the first thing that worries me when I think about baseball in a fantasy campaign is, how are you going to prevent magical cheating? Think about that. You could have wizards who enchant the players in such a way so that they run faster, they throw harder, they hit a ball, better, they swing a bat quicker, their gloves never miss a ground ball and things like that. So what I was thinking was dead magic zones. Baseball is played in dead magic zones where no magical items function, period. Innate abilities are suppressed, and these are zones that are specially created by, we'll call them sport wizards. Whatever you want to call them, enchanters. I guess they would be enchanters. Maybe they would be abjurers. I think abjuration would probably be the school of magic that would be more appropriate to that. So that's what you're going to have. Now, there's that, but then you've also got a few other things. What if you have an ogre batting cleanup? He's, 8.5 feet tall. He swings basically a telephone pole, and he can knock the ball 1,100 feet. What do you do there? Simple. You set up separate leagues by species. I know it's a thing about it, though. That's racial segregation. But how else are you going to handle that? Okay? And I'm going to make an analogy to real-life politics. You don't want men playing women's sports, even if they pretend they're women. Okay? We're not doing the female impersonator thing in my world. Not happening. So we're not going to do orcs who identify as hobgoblins and ogres who identify as hobbits. It's not the case. What you are is what you are, and if you couldn't accept what you are, I'm not going to accept what you claim to be. So think what you want, and look at me. This is me not caring. Now, the way you would do it then is you would have a goblin league, and you would have an ogre league, and you would have humans and demi-humans. Could you group humans and demi-humans together? Would you really want a dwarf trying to steal second base? Would you really want a hobbit running around in center field? Or a gnome? Sorry, you can't say hobbit. So would you want a halfling? Would you want a kobold playing right field? That's the thing, is I think that for certain races you would want to have smaller fields, and that's where American baseball lends itself very well to adaptation, because in American baseball I can think of 3 distinct settings of fields. Like, for instance, Little League, which is for your 9 to 12-year-old humans. They play on an infield where there are 60 feet between each base, and the pitcher's mound is 46 feet, I believe, from the plate. So you got 46 and 60. Then the next level up in intermediate ball is 50-70, where the mound is just a few feet farther back, and the bases are 10 feet further apart. And notice that I use farther and further in different contexts. Farther is when you're discussing an indeterminate distance. Further is when you are discussing a distance that you know. 6 miles further, a bit farther. Those are the proper usages. Anyway, see how I go on tangents? Yeah, I'm old. I didn't shave this morning when I got a shower, so yeah, I should have. This is 2 days of stubble, and it's coming in more salt and pepper now. I had a beard late last summer for, I don't know, about a month and a half, and got sick of it and whittled it down because my back is shot. I've got 2 vertebrae that are totally gone in my lower back, so standing for more than 5 minutes becomes excruciating, and I shave in the shower. So I get in the shower, wash up as quickly as I can, and then try to shave and be done. And by the time I'm done, my legs are on fire. My back is absolutely screaming at me. And as soon as I get out of the shower, I have to sit down on the toilet for a minute and do what I call resetting my back. So anyway, I didn't shave because my back was already killing me when I got in the shower. So this is what you get when you go 2 days without shaving with Dave. Anyway, what do you do with Magic? You have infield settings of 46-60, 50-70, which is intermediate league. Now, that's for 11 to 13-year-olds. And then you get into junior league, senior league, or high school, pros, college level, where it's 60 feet 6 inches from the mound to home plate for the pitcher, and then it's 90 feet between the bases. Well, what do you do if you have ogres? I would say put it 80 feet from the mound to the plate, and then do 120-foot bases, maybe? I don't know. How much more interesting would ogre baseball be than human baseball, or how much less interesting would it be? Ogres aren't as smart as humans and demi-humans, so would they be able to understand a hit-and-run play or a wheel play? You know, of course, Baltimore Orioles have had issues this year handling a wheel play, so we won't get into that because I'm a long-suffering Orioles fan and I don't feel like crying live on the internet. Anyway, I think that this lends itself to a lot of possibilities. You would have massive numbers of people participating in this because it's baseball. Baseball is a great sport, and it's the premier sport. Soccer is fun, but in soccer, I don't like playing a sport where you can't use your hands. It's kind of silly. It was originally invented, from my understanding, to prevent young men from masturbating. So I'm going to go ahead and stay away from the wanker sport and discuss the American pastime. And people can say, well, it's football. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, all right, whatever. But baseball would be, football's a totally different story. We're not even going to try to adapt football to a fantasy setting because, the Dead Magic thing, I think, is a good playing field leveler, though. So you would have an area where people can't influence the game. There would be a ton of gambling on it because wherever there's sports, there's betting, and God knows with all the crap in the real world right now, with all the betting apps. I play a couple of game apps on my phone, and I'm constantly getting hit with ads from places like Kalshi and DraftKings. Guys, I'm going to level with you. You're not the world's best bookie. Stop wasting your money on that crap. Okay? They take so much in fees and VIG and everything else that 99% of you aren't going to get ahead. And for those of you that think you're in the 1%, you ain't. You just ain't. It's just not the case. So, you can delude yourself and think that you've got some amazing level of knowledge in the sport. Pete Rose was playing and managing for the Reds, and he couldn't get games right. All right? So, think about that. And we'll discuss him belonging in the Hall of Fame some other time. I'm in favor of it now. I used to not be, but I'm in favor of it now because someone made the very good point that he wouldn't have gone to the Hall of Fame for what he did as a manager anyway. What he went in for was what he did as a player, and this is a man who said that he would run through hell in a gasoline suit in order to play baseball. He was the quintessential gamer. Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, I forget which one it was, we're in a game. One of them hit a home run, and Pete Rose chased the ball to the fence and tried to climb the fence to go after it. It was way over the fence. It was a no-doubt home run. And then Mickey said to Maris, or Maris said to Mickey, "Did you see old Charlie Hustle over there trying to get that ball?" And that's where the nickname stuck. And that was from some spring training game in the mid-'60s. But yeah, he should be in the Hall of Fame. But anyway, back to baseball. However, one proviso with that. If it is ever definitively proven that he bet on the Reds to lose when he was a manager and they lost, then his name should be erased from all baseball history. Okay? Because he could have manipulated the lineup. He could have failed to make a pinch hit when he should have, or made one when he didn't need to. screwed around with the pitching rotation, screwed around with the relief pitcher usage. There's a lot of things. That's why they call them managers. That's why they call them managers, because they can manage the game. And if you intentionally mismanage the game, well, and I mean, we've seen NCAA basketball point shaving, and we've seen all kinds of other scandals going on. Olympic judging scandals, and well, hell, there's a scandal right now in baseball with guys that are being paid to throw balls, for money. We've already discussed that in the podcast, as a matter of fact. So there you have it. But this would help a little bit. I am not in the school of thought regarding pro baseball in a fantasy campaign that I am in regarding youth sports in the real world, because having worked for 17 years as a sports writer, and I say that a lot because, hey, if you do something the majority of your adult life, there's a good chance that when you're sharing your experiences, you're going to bring it up. So anyway, having worked in the field for 17 years of covering almost entirely youth sports, I can tell you this much. Parents are so horrible at games now that the game should be played at an undisclosed location. Only the players, the coaches, anyone who has direct association with the team in that capacity, in some official capacity, the referees or umpires, and members of the media should be allowed to go to youth sporting events. They could be videotaped, but no parents. Okay? Hold them at an undisclosed location and then release the results later. Studies have shown, and one in particular showed, that the majority of kids, well, here's what they did, was they asked hundreds and hundreds of youth athletes, what is the least favorite part of your involvement in sports? And the overwhelming majority of respondents said the ride home after the game. You know why? Because then you had to get into mom and dad's car and you had to listen to probably dad go on and on for the entire trip home about what went right, what went wrong, what should have been done, what shouldn't have been done about the game. And you have to relive everything that you might not have gotten correct. I can tell you right now, my two boys played baseball. The youngest one played in Challengers Little League, which was for special needs kids. So they didn't really keep score or anything. It was just hitting the ball and running the bases for fun. But my oldest son played several years of Little League baseball, and yeah, he didn't hear that from me, because I saw so much of it. When you see people act a way that you don't like, if you have any sense at all, you're not going to emulate that. And I didn't want to be that dad over and over again, because quite honestly, and this is an indictment to all you sports parents, every single one of you are like this. It's so incredibly rare to find a sports parent that isn't insufferable and doesn't behave like their 401k is riding on the next pitch or kicked ball, that I'm just going to make the generalization. And if I'm only right 97% of the time, I'm still right 97% of the time, so 33 out of 34 of you are going to be like it. So if there are 100 parents at a game, there are only 3 of you that aren't insufferable. Yeah, undisclosed location, period. Now, as for fantasy sports, we wouldn't do that, but the entire complex would have to be a dead magic zone. Now, the thought of magical concession stands is fun, but maybe what you would do is have them at the fringes of the dead magic zone where they could magically create this or that pastry or concoction for a fan, and so on and so forth. But there could be no magic within, say, 50 yards of the complex itself. So if you wanted to go get a snow cone that makes your tongue glow in the dark, then you got to walk over here out of the dead magic zone to get it. And when you're in the dead magic zone, it doesn't work, because that would prevent things like haste spells and fly spells and expeditious retreat spells, which allow you to change your, rate of speed so that you could run a lot faster, or you could fly. Are flying players allowed in fantasy campaign baseball? So this is the real fantasy baseball, not that nerdy stuff that people are doing online where, I got so-and-so on my fantasy team, I hope he strikes out 12 guys the next time he starts. Yeah, I did fantasy sports for a little while. I was actually very, very good at it. And in the football leagues I was in, I was usually top 1%, but the point system they did was vastly different from the fantasy point system that's used commonly nowadays. I liked my point system a lot better. They're the one that was on the website that's no longer open. I guess that's why they're no longer open, because it wasn't very popular. But I liked that point system, and I did well. And out of 34,900 players, I was number 337 my last year. So there you go, top 1%. I knew what I was talking about. I don't anymore. I don't follow football or baseball enough to know what the hell I'm talking about definitively in terms of doing fantasy sports. I just know that the Orioles are bound for mediocrity this year. I saw the writing on the wall. I saw trends. And, oh, look, there's 6 wins below 500 in mid-May, and they're, 10 games out of first place already? Yeah, they're going to finish at about 70 and 92. I'd originally said 88 and 74. Then I revised it down to 77 and 85. Now I'm going to have to guess 70 and 92. Okay? That would be 3 losses away from a 95-loss campaign. That would be 8 away from losing 100 games. And Lord knows the Orioles have managed to do that a little bit in recent memory. My senior year, they lost 107. But they lost significantly more than that just a few years back. So anyway, back to fantasy baseball instead of real-world baseball. How do you prevent cheating in a magical world? Basically, you would have to do dead magic zones. Again, that's what you want. And you could still have wagering and gambling and so on and so forth. But you would also have to make sure that... See, some spells aren't affected by dead magic zones. Once they hit, boom, they're permanent. And there would have to be a way to counter that. So it's got to be run by who would run it. What alignment would you have? Now we're going to talk about alignment, which is not a popular subject for more recent gamers, but to be honest, 5th edition D&D, Pathfinder 2nd edition are so incredibly dumbed down that I'm not going to address them in that context, because 5th edition is basically D&D with training wheels. All right, when you compare it to 3rd, 3.5 runs rings around 5th edition in terms of rules crunch and, to me, playability, because they've taken a lot of the options out of the game that you could exercise. And it's just, like I said, it's D&D with training wheels. I don't want to read Rifles for Weighty anymore. I want to read Rick Atkinson. And those of you that get that analogy get what I'm talking about. And those of you that don't, read Rifles for Weighty and then read Rick Atkinson's Liberation Trilogy and tell me which one you prefer. Okay? Rifles for Weighty was a great novel when I was 13, but that was 40 years ago. Speaking of going back in time, we're going to segue over to anecdotal evidence real quick, and then we're going to talk a little bit about politics. Not even going to talk about American politics. Anecdotal evidence, we're going to talk real quick about the significance of today's date, May 18th. May 18th, 1979, real simple. It was the day I first got glasses. I was 8.5 years old. Went to Dr. Stanley Feinblum in Cambridge, Maryland. He was in a strip mall. The strip mall still exists. It's undergone a number of renovations over the years. And where Dr. Feinblum's office is now, I don't even know what it is. I think it's a women's shoe store or something. I don't even remember. But Dr. Feinblum was a really great guy. And the way it shook out was in the year or so prior to my getting glasses, my dad in particular noticed that my eyesight just wasn't very good. Over in Del Mar, Maryland, just south of the Delaware-Maryland line, hence the name Del Mar for the town, there's also a town on the Maryland-Delaware line farther north called Marydale. Anyway, we're in Del Mar, Maryland, and I'm 8 years old. We go to the drag races. There's a racetrack in Del Mar. I think it's a quarter-mile track. Or no, it's a half-mile track. And they... had races every weekend. I don't know the schedule anymore. They're still open, but I haven't been since this night when I was a child. But we go to the concession stand. Dad paid for pit passes so we could go into the pits and look at all the cars, and had a capital time. It was a great night. had fun. As I recall, it wasn't a very hot night either. It was just a beautiful summer night. We went to the concession stand, and Dad says, "What do you want?" Well, I couldn't read the menu because my eyesight was so bad. I'm very, very nearsighted. I think I'm 2200 in my right eye and 2400 in my left. Incredibly myopic. And then later that summer, my uncle and his wife and 2 sons from Denver came out to visit us, and we're in a field behind our house in Hurlock, Maryland. It's getting near dusk. It's the edge of dark, and we're playing a little bit of pickup baseball. John and Craig, my cousins, are out roaming around in the field doing younger kid stuff, and Dad and Uncle Tommy and I are playing baseball, kind of, sort of. Basically, Dad's catching, Uncle Tommy's pitching, and I'm batting, and Uncle Tommy's throwing the ball, and, you know, he wasn't exactly Nolan Ryan. He was trying to make it hittable, so I couldn't hit it. I had a hell of a time seeing it to hit it. And he actually said, "Buddy, I think you might need glasses." And the next thing I knew, I got glasses. And May 18th marks 47 years of me having corrective lenses. I have them, where'd I put them? Here they are. Right here. They're all ragged out. You can see I've got frickin' painter's tape holding one of the shafts on, because I'm broke and I don't feel like spending $300 on a new pair of glasses. Even with insurance, there's stuff that isn't covered. So, yeah, I'm fine. And the thing about it is I use them basically as readers, but for things that are far away. Where I'm at right now, looking at over here on my right are my show notes, and over here is the video of the stream I'm doing. I can see all that fine, but if I go back a foot, things get a little blurry, and then I have to put the glasses on. So when I'm driving, I put them on. I have driven without my glasses before. I have driven in the dark without my glasses before, and without my contacts. It was not an experience I would want to repeat. But that was because I got dirt in one contact and was driving with one eye open and one eye closed the whole way home. It was unpleasant. Because when I open the one eye by accident, I can't see squat with this one, and this one I can see fine. I did have a time I went to a party, and I didn't get drunk. I had maybe 1 or 2 beers, but I woke up the next morning with both contacts in the same eye. That was wild. Yeah, so anyway, back to May 18th. May 18th, 79, that happened. Well, May 18th, 1980, to celebrate the first anniversary of me getting glasses, Mount St. Helens erupted. And so that's how I always remember the anniversary of the day I got glasses, was because exactly 1 year later, there was this huge volcanic eruption. And I don't think we've had a significant volcanic eruption in America since 1980, outside Alaska. But in the contiguous 48, I don't think that we've actually had one. Nothing on the scale of Mount St. Helens, anyway. So that's the significance of May 18th. That's part 1 of anecdotal evidence. We'll get to part 2 later. We're going to go back into dragons real quick, talking about sports. But then, hold on. I said we'd do politics. Let's do politics. Government update from the UK. They had a huge Unite the Kingdom rally of us right-wing nutjobs that day, you know, where, God forbid, we want people to come here legally and not illegally, and don't want the children raped by, you know, Pakistani gangs. But apparently Prime Minister Keir Starmer is still clinging like a drowning man to a piece of cork to his spot as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, because I guess somebody has to defend the Pakistani rape gangs, and somebody has to be feckless and useless and incompetent, and to brag about keeping someone out of war when they, quite honestly, the British aren't really ready for a war right now, okay? They've got 50 serviceable tanks. The Royal Navy is an absolute bloody shambles compared to what it used to be, and yeah. But he's refusing to step down despite more than 80, I believe it is, members of Parliament now calling for him to do so. But it's okay. The history of people who refuse to step down is not a good one. And liberals are never on the right side of history. So, you know, they can say, well, he's not Liberal Party, he's Labor Party, whatever. It doesn't matter. They're interchangeable. They're all communists. Okay? And they're all scared to death of the Muslims, the Islamists in particular, that have infiltrated the country by the millions. And if if your daughter is raped by a Pakistani gang, you call the Pakistanis rapists, and instead of them getting arrested for rape, you get arrested for insulting the Pakistanis. That's how absolutely back-assward the British have become right now. And they're also disarmed, so little girl waves a hatchet to defend herself from such people, and the little girl gets arrested. The UK has fallen. We won't be going there anytime soon. But, won't anyone think of the poor terrorists? Aw. Imagine if Muslims killed half of Britain. What would the backlash be against Muslims? It would just be awful. Just be terribly racist. Because, Islam isn't a religion, it's a race now. Jesus. It's why I decided the other night that I was basically going to stop engaging in political discussions online, which is a huge step. Stop engaging in political discussions online because people claim that the average IQ of an American is 98. I think it's more like 85. All right. There is absolutely no research or critical thinking done really by most people on the right and by hardly anyone at all on the left. I would say 20% of the people on the right do a little bit of research and less than 1% of people on the left do. And when the people on the left do it, they find that the facts aren't to their liking, so then they contort them. So you're either dealing with ignorance or lies, or both. And I can't stand casualism, so that means intellectual dishonesty, by the way. So, there's whenever you argue with a liberal, there's always this scraping sound when you make a point, and that's the sound of them dragging the goalpost into a different place because they keep changing the parameters of the argument and pretending not to understand. And so I'll just say this much. We didn't finish the job in 1865. All right? What we should have done was taken every slaveholder and deported them to Liberia. I think that would have been the ultimate irony, get rid of white supremacists, make them live under black people for the rest of their lives. And then I think putting the shoe on the other foot would have been the perfect justice for the people who rebelled. Instead, they built themselves statues, and then 100 years later, they tore down the statues and blamed the people that won the war. Good job, guys. Moving on. See how I went on a tangent? I was talking about Britain. I went from Britain to the Civil War. Oh, it's not a matter of being multi-talented. It's a matter of being ADD. But back into Dragons. 30-day D&D challenge. We're on day 14. Who is my favorite NPC? And I got to say, this is one. There are two now. Second one just popped in my head. I won't go terribly deep into the second one. The first one was Lord Subion. In my friend Rich's D&D campaign, this would have been an AD&D game he ran in the 90s. We were basically doing chores for a king, and his, what the hell was his official title? Lord High Seneschal for the king, like the king's second in command, kind of, or his top cabinet minister, whatever you want to call him, was this snotty, condescending bastard named Lord Subion, who turned out to be a red dragon polymorphed into human form and was manipulating the politics of this nation just because he could, basically, and to try to disrupt the nation so that he could do whatever dragon stuff he wanted to do. I don't remember all the particulars, but I remember, you know what they say, when you die, people aren't going to remember you for what you did. They're going to remember you for how they made you feel. Well, we ended up killing Subion in a knockdown drag-out fight, and he was, of course, like an incredibly old red dragon, so it took a little bit of doing, but we managed to do it. And he was a great, great NPC. Another NPC, my friend Art, a buddy of mine from back in the 90s, played a late 2nd edition campaign at his place, and it was a nautically themed thing, and there was this half-orc named Pigwig, who was a comic relief character, but he also was incredibly strong, and Pigwig was a great character. But Lord Subion is the kind of villain that you make a campaign around. And that was worth all of the blood, toil, tears, and sweat that campaign involved playing under Rich. It was a great one, and I would have to say that would be my favorite NPC, because he had a lot of irons in the fire. He didn't just have the plot that the PCs were dealing with. He had other things going on and other machinations working here, there, and everywhere. He was, incredibly intelligent, had been around for quite a while and made a ton of connections, and just made life difficult for the characters. But with him being involved in so many things and stirring so many different pots in so many places, it brings me to the subject of making your world dynamic. And what you want to do when you're DMing or GMing or whatever, is have a world where there are things that the players' characters hear about that they weren't involved in, that they could have been involved in and could have altered, but that happened without their involvement, to let them know, A, you can't be everywhere at once, and B, not everything turns out the way you want it to, and C, this is why I said make your own decisions, because they're going to have ramifications here, there, and everywhere else. If you fail to act in this kingdom, then something in this kingdom happens that you might not have wanted, or that the king might not have wanted. And if you fail to act over here, then, that'll have some ripple effects as well. You want to have, I had a campaign where the characters were investigating a haunted house. Meanwhile, in the next country to the east, there was a massive war going on. In a country far to the west, there was an attempted coup. And they weren't involved in it because they were busy finding a dead mage, his spell book, and his cursed luckstone. So, and also, another thing I can't stress enough, make sure that you throw an occasional unbalanced encounter at your party. Whether it's incredibly below their pay grade or way, way above it, throw something at them that they can't handle or shouldn't bother with, to let them know that not everything is suited for their level, okay? If they're high teens levels characters, you don't want them to screw around with a bunch of kobolds doing stuff, because it's not worth their time anymore in terms of the cost-benefit ratio of getting involved. But if they're third level, throw a dragon at them every now and then. And drop subtle, not so subtle maybe, hints that maybe this isn't the best time for you to engage this guy. Maybe you should consider leaving the scene. Maybe running away to fight another day is the wisest option. Discretion is the better part of valor, as they say. Maybe they can learn it. And if they don't, they will. They will. They'll just learn it the hard way. There are two ways to learn everything. There's the easy way and the hard way. And some people choose the hard way. And I'm not saying kill your characters every now and then just for the fun of it. No, you morons. I'm saying challenge them sometimes with things that they can't handle, so that they understand what they can handle. Okay? I've had a party at the mercy of NPCs before, and the NPCs had them all beaten and unconscious and bound, and they could have easily just killed them and gone about their way, but instead they didn't. I told that story in a previous podcast about a spell book that I just alluded to a minute ago. You make the world more and more realistic, because there are certain things that you and I couldn't handle right now. Like, I couldn't handle dealing with an angry mob, but in my 20s, maybe I could have dealt with a few people at once. Not anymore. I doubt I could handle an angry pack of Girl Scouts right now. So, there's that. Yeah, I probably could, because I'd just buy their cookies and tell them to leave me the hell alone. Anyway, and they'd be glad that I told them that once I bought all the Thin Mints, because the Thin Mints are the best ones. Anybody eats that stuff with coconut on them, there's something wrong with you and you need professional help. Now, we're going to go back into anecdotal evidence and talk about the tour bus incident from 2002. I saw a video the other night from some small local chain pizza shop where a guy walks in at 9:58 p.m., the store closes at 10 p.m., and he proceeds to order about $80 worth of food. And you hear the guy in the back who's manning the ovens and doing the cooking screaming obscenities and slamming things because it was 2 minutes until close. And if you've ever worked in fast food or in a pizza place, which I've done both, and actually managed for Domino's, managed for Papa John's, ran shifts for Pizza Hut. I wasn't officially in management, but I did run a few shifts for them. If you're 2 minutes away from your official closing, odds are you've gotten a good deal of cleaning done, unless you've been absolutely murdered, which has happened, and I'm about to discuss. And for somebody to come in late and order a bunch of stuff, you've probably already got the make line and preparation area clean in the expectation that you're not going to get a customer with the last 2 minutes. Pretty much at every fast food or restaurant job I've had, there's been someone come in the last hour, the last 5 minutes, whatever the case may be, that has thrown off our timetable where we could get the heck out of there and be done for the night. Because, you know, when you close at 11, you don't want to be 1 a.m. cleaning up. You want to be out of there as soon after 11 as you can, because you have a life outside of work. And if you don't have a life outside of work, then by all means, stick around and clean longer, but we're not going to pay you. So don't. Anyway, it's early March 2002, Centreville, Maryland, the Domino's Pizza, right off of Route 213 on the south end of town. As you're coming into town from, say, Route 50, you'd be heading north, so the strip mall that the Domino's is in there with a Food Lion, and it's on the right. Well, sitting in front, kind of, from 213, if you look toward the strip mall, you would see a Domino's in the strip mall, but in front of it, there's a McDonald's. Well, one night, I was the manager of the newly opened, it opened, I want to say, tail end of February 2002, the newly opened Domino's in Centreville, Maryland. Even got my picture in the paper as the manager. A tour bus pulls up in the parking lot of the McDonald's. And I'm like, oh, wow. Their lobby closes at 11. They're getting a tour bus full of people at 10 o'clock. Oh, my God. They're going to be pissed. Oh, they're going to be so mad. Well, yeah, here's the thing. I watched as 3 or 4 people walked over to the McDonald's and went in to get food. And then the other 36 people came into my Domino's. Yeah, I was glad, because as a manager, I bonused based on sales, but we were within an hour of closing. It was just me and one driver, because you keep your crew levels at the absolute bare minimum to get things accomplished. And on a Tuesday night, which it was, you don't carry a ton of people, because if you get 2 deliveries in the opposite direction and you're running a Domino's late at night with one driver, then somebody's just going to have to wait a while, and you would warn them about that when they place their order. If they get irate, well, that's on them. You know, you can't run a profitable restaurant by keeping 15 drivers when you get 2 orders an hour. You would be what's called broke, because you couldn't afford to keep the lights on, because your payroll would be too high. Your FL, your food and labor numbers, would be so screwed up that you wouldn't be able to do anything. And I'll discuss the story of the Papa John's Pizza Trailer Park argument from 1999 some other time. Right now we're in 2002 and we're in Centreville. So 36, count them, 36, not 10, not 15, not 25, 36 people come into the lobby of the Centreville Domino's. Well, if you've ever been in the Centreville Domino's, unless they've renovated in the last few years and expanded greatly, which, judging by the width of the storefront, they haven't, the lobby's not terribly big. It's not much bigger than the living room of a decent-sized house. Okay, so you have the lobby as you come in the door, and then you have the counter area, and then you have the back part of the store where the oven is, and so on and so forth. Well, 36 people crammed themselves in, and I had one driver, we'll name him Fred, and Fred was on the road. Fred did not have a cell phone. This was 2002. Not everyone had them at this point. Fred was on a delivery, and Fred was out for 25 minutes on that delivery, and just as these 36 people came in, the phone rang and someone placed a delivery order. So that meant that when Fred came back, Fred would be gone again for probably 20 minutes. So that meant that for 45 of the final 60 minutes I was open, I would not have the assistance of Fred dealing with 36 people. So I had what's called a big pie hour. Pie hours are basically how many items, pizzas, pies, you would produce in a given hour. Well, I had a 51 pie hour. Okay, it wasn't just pizzas, it was also breadsticks, and I believe we had chicken kickers back then. I'm trying to remember if we had chicken kickers. I know we had, I'm trying to remember if we had wings in O2. I don't think we did. I don't think we had. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We had chicken wings in O2. Yes, I did. Yes, I remember. We had wings in O2, and you could have them barbecue hot, extra hot, or plain. And so pie hours included pizzas, bread, and wings. So one night on Kent Island, 15 minutes from Centreville, in the summer of 2001, we had a 138 pie hour. So from the hours of 6 to 7 one night, I want to say it was July, in a heavy rainstorm, we had people call in and ordered, during a 1 hour period, 138 items, which is a significant amount. That's a lot of stuff. Now, if you're fully staffed, you're doing fine. Now, the thing is, we could have used about 13 to 15 drivers, and we only had 8. So our out-the-door numbers sucked, and we were pushing stuff out the door at 51 and 53 minutes when you're trying to get it out in 20. So our late percentage went absolutely through the roof, and it knocked us from a 5-star store that one night, knocked us from a 5-star store down to a 3-star because we didn't have enough drivers for a really bad Friday night dinner rush. This, however, was a carry-out rush in the final hour of a day's operations, and I was there by myself. Now, for a competent Domino's manager or MIT manager in training, which is just before manager, or a shift runner, realistically, you can handle a 15 to 20 pie hour without a lot of undue stress. Okay, my wife never understood this whole thing because she said, well, you're just taking a pizza and putting it in the oven. Yeah, honey, you've got to make it yourself. Well, that only takes a minute. I said, okay, let's break this down. You got a 20 pie hour. Let's say that you can make a single pizza in 1 minute. Okay, so there's 20 minutes of your time. Well, it takes 1 minute to place each order. So let's say there's 15 orders and making 20 pies. So there's 15 more minutes of your time. That's 35 minutes. Then you have to get the food out of the oven, box it up, and conduct the business transaction. Getting it out of the oven, boxing it up, and putting it on the rack takes about 30 seconds per item. So that's another 10 minutes. So now you're at 45 minutes. Each transaction, when you have to make sure that the payment is arranged, takes another 90 seconds front and back because they're placing the order and they might pay for it in advance, or they're placing the order and they pay for it once it's received. Well, we usually did the pay in advance thing, but you still have to physically remove it from the oven, put it on the cut table, cut it, put it in a box, walk the box out front, hand it to the person, interact with them for a few seconds and say thank you or whatever, and then you go on your merry way. Well, if those interactions take 30 seconds, that's another 10-minute shot. So you're looking at your whole hour pretty much being taken up by 20 items. 15 orders would keep you very busy as one person. Okay, 20 pie hour would keep you very busy as one person. Now, I had a 51. So I had 2.55 times as much work to do. So I had 2.5 times as many food items to prepare, 2.5 times as many orders to take, 2.5 times as many boxes to put things in, and labels to put on boxes, and payments to handle, and interactions to have. So I had 2.5 hours of work in that 60 minutes. And I was getting a little shagged. I got to admit, it was a very rough hour. It's at the end of the day, I was working a double, so I had been in there since 9 a.m. So I'm 13 hours into a 14-hour day and had all this to do, and yeah, it took its toll. And when Fred got back from his final delivery, and thank God after that one delivery came in from 10:40 until 11, he was available to help, and I was still pushing stuff out the door incredibly it took a while, but they were, to a person, they were very understanding about it because they all saw that everyone walked in at once. And I told them, I said, hey guys, y'all planning to order? And, them nodded and yeah, and so on and so forth. I said, okay, well, just so you know, I'm alone. I've got no staff because it's late at night. And I've got one driver, but he's on the road. So there's going to be a little bit of waiting. Please, sit on the bench. Take turns sitting on the bench. Might be a few minutes. If you'd like, grab a soda out of the cooler if you feel like you've waited too long. And, we'll take care of you. Well, I gave out, I don't know, maybe a dozen sodas that night as an apology. Because it's the price of doing business. Otherwise, you lose the orders or your reputation goes in the toilet. So, all in all, I did well. I think it was a $622 hour is what we made that hour, which was 40% of the day's take in the final hour. I think we had a $1,500 day in gross receipts. And it helped the labor numbers because we only had me, who was salaried for the whole day, and one driver who was paid driver wage, which was below minimum wage because he was considered a tipped employee. So, yeah. Yeah, we made out pretty good. Now, his wage did increase when he was working inside the store because of the way the rules work. But, when you're on the road, you get paid a different rate. So, anyway, yeah. Fred and I had quite a fun time, and we were about 12:30 getting cleaned up. We had, the make line was broken down, and in the back of the store there were plastic and Lexan containers that were being washed. When he could get them washed between deliveries. And I'm trying to get cleaning done out front, sweeping the floor, getting the mop bucket ready, spraying this, trying to do that. Whatever little things you could do without interfering with store operations to take you one tiny step closer to getting the clothes done quickly, I was trying to do it. And the owners of the store at that time were two guys named Andy and Drew. I know Andy is still at least one of the owners because I've seen his face in commercials that he's done for the store. He owns several franchises in the area, and he's a nice guy. I liked working for Andy. So Andy and Drew saw the paperwork the next morning, obviously, and just so happened I was off the next day. And I got a phone call, and it's Drew. And you had a majority owner and a minority owner. And Drew owned 51%, Andy owned 49%. So Drew was technically the owner of the store. And he calls us like, hey, Dave. Hi, Drew, what's up? I saw you had a fun hour there at the end. Yeah, we got hammered. He said, in the business, we call it stretched. Okay, and here's where the bad language comes in, folks. You ready? Okay, turn your heads. Put your fingers in your ears, whatever. I said, stretched? You mean stretched thin? He says, no, you got bent over and boned in the backside and your butthole got stretched. I was like, that wasn't even entirely how he said it. It was way filthier the way he put it. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about accurate. I did wake up kind of sore, come to think of it. So he's like, so did you learn anything? I was like, yeah, I learned staffing levels are never what we need them to be. He says, yeah, that's part of the equation. That's part of the equation. Just, I mean, all in all, your numbers are good. You probably took you a while getting stuff out the door. I said, yeah. But, yeah. But did you enjoy it? I said, in a masochistic way, I actually kind of did. Because it felt like I was playing a video game. I was Lucy at the Chocolate Factory, trying to keep up. Because you got, wasn't the phone ringing at that point, because the phone stopped ringing, thankfully, after that last delivery phone call. Otherwise, that would have made things even more complicated. But instead of the phone ringing, we had people at the aisle where I basically lined them up and took all their orders, and then, gave them fair warning. I said, okay, I've got all your orders, but now I got to make them. So they're going to take a few minutes. And, got all that, and then I got pies falling out of the oven when I'm trying to do other things, and so on and so forth, and yeah, I felt like Lucy in the Chocolate Factory. I really did, but I enjoyed it, and I did, but there were of course other things down the road where I didn't enjoy it, and Yeah, Andy and Drew were the owners. I liked working with Andy. We'll just leave it at that. And so I went on to work for another franchisee shortly thereafter as a driver, trainer, and a shift runner. And, yeah. But that was might have been the most fun night we had, actually, even including opening day where we kind of threw a party in the lobby. But, yeah, the tour bus incident from 2002 was a learning experience. And my heart always goes out to people who work in the service industry like that. When you have a massive number of people pop in, or you have that one guy. You know, it happened when I was managing for Five Guys. We had one woman ordered a whole ton of crap online at 9:54 p.m. and the store closed at 10. It had died down, and where the store was located was a place where pretty much everybody was done their eating for the night by 8 p.m. So after 8, it was dead at this Five Guys. And at 9:54, this girl orders a ton of crap. Well, we had already gone ahead and started doing some of the cleaning and getting the clothes underway. And then that happened, and yeah. But we managed. It just takes you longer getting out the door. And when you have a double back, that's kind of a bummer when you basically work a closing shift one night and then work an opening shift the next morning, which was the case that particular night at Five Guys. And I had a 1 hour almost drive each way to work. That was challenging, to say the least, but it's okay. Just sleep when you're dead. So that's the story, long and short of the tour bus incident from 2002 at Centreville, Maryland Domino's. Those were the days. That was something. That was back when the wife was pregnant with our second son, and when we found out he was going to have a disability, that was also part of why I stepped down as managing that Domino's, was because I wanted to have more time to devote to my family. And I'm glad that I did that, because working 70-hour weeks, managing a pizza joint, when you've got a child that's going to need to go, as it turns out, to Johns Hopkins multiple times in his first 3 months. Yeah, it wouldn't have gone well schedule-wise, and there would have been much harumphing and gnashing of teeth from ownership on my absence. So, and then there was, of course, the incident where I did the truck delivery. You order the truck 3 times a week, and I forgot to order cheese, and we were a pizza joint, and I forgot to order cheese, so I had to drive across the Bay Bridge to Odenton, Maryland, to the regional commissary to pick up 16 boxes of cheese one Saturday afternoon. Yeah, that didn't sit well with the boss either, but he lived. Be ashamed to die pissed off, right? So there you go. There's that story. Now we're going to get to Showtime, where I recommend a movie, and this week's recommendation is Fanboys. The movie's set in 1998. It was made around 2005, and it involves 4 friends making a trip from Chicago to George Lucas's ranch in California in the attempt to snag a copy of Star Wars Episode 1 for their friend who's dying. Now, I won't spoil this movie a whole lot, but it's one of the better films in its genre about fans and gamers and stuff like that. It's entertaining. It's worth 90 minutes of your time, and I think you'd enjoy it if you like Star Wars or even Star Trek, because there's a couple of scenes where they get involved with some Trekkies, and it comes to blows, and it's hilarious, and it's got some great parts. It really does, and it's about friendship and loyalty and fandom, and a little bit about fame, and it's campy, and it's stupid, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. So I want to thank my friend Jason for bringing the DVD over years ago to our house to watch, and I watched it again last week. Fanboys, Fanboys, look it up. It's a good film. I'd strongly recommend that you take a chance on it, because it's 90 minutes that you're cool if you don't get them back. You know, there are some movies, like, I got to level with you. Avatar, I thought it freaking sucked. That's why I'm not watching any of the sequels. Avatar, to me, was Dances with Wolves, but set in outer space. If anybody's seen the 1990 Kevin Costner Western called Dances with Wolves, okay, take John Dunbar, put him in outer space, make the Lakota the aliens from Avatar, and you've got pretty much the same premise. It's about a military officer who goes native and basically sides with the indigenous people in an area against the evil government that he worked for. You know, and Dances with Wolves is a great film, and Avatar was crap. Yeah. Oh, it's got great CGI. Okay, yeah, if I wanted to watch a cartoon, then it's a wonderful cartoon. But it's just not my cup of tea. And Fanboys, on the other hand, is fun. It doesn't take itself very seriously. It's an indie film, and I would strongly recommend Fanboys. Maybe next week I will recommend my favorite gamer movie of all time, and if you know me at all, you'll know which one I'm going to tell you about. But yeah, let's do that as our recommendation for podcast 42 next Monday. We'll make the Showtime thing, the movie recommendation, a Monday thing. It sounds like a plan. But anyway, I'm going to let you guys go now. We're going to wrap things up. Final thought: if you don't do it right the first time, when are you going to have time to do it twice? So whenever you do something, do it right the first time. Okay? It's just that simple. This rule, of course, does not apply when you work as a writer or novelist. So I speak from experience. That's why there's editing. But in general, in life, if you have a task, do it right the first time. That way you don't have to do it twice. Especially if it's a task that you don't like, do it right the first time. That way you don't have to mess with it again. Okay? If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it twice? There's your final thought. And to wrap things up, make sure to follow the show on Twitter. The handle is at the WSPD Podcast. More stuff is coming. Like I said, there's not enough time in the day. You can help sponsor us through our Patreon page at patreon.com/WSPDragons. Join us there. Sponsorships start at just $3 a month. That's 10 cents a day. And I won't get Sarah McLachlan to sing In the Arms of an Angel to make you cry like some other people do. You can also help us upgrade our equipment and pay our operating expenses via Cash App and Venmo. At both of those, it's WSPD Pod. And as always, you can hear us on Spotify, where we began. Please follow us there, as well as iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon, YouTube. Going to Rumble again soon. I'm going to give the Rumble thing another try. And maybe someday we'll even be on Apple Podcasts. But I don't know what the heck happened there. But thanks for your time. Have a great day. God bless. Be well.